disrupted. And they actually decided also to pay the ransomware to the hackers. But they also hired Fox IT to do the investigation. By the way, this was after I worked at Fox IT. This was in 2019. And they decided afterwards to make the report public. So this is why we can use it, and it's very informative if you want to learn more about digital forensics in a cyber investigation, in this case in a ransomware attack. First of all, you should realize that this is not the first. Many of those attacks happen. They are typically also performed by most of the same groups. There are several big groups that perform these ransomware attacks. And 9 months earlier, actually, a very similar attack happened to Norsk Hydro, a company in Norway with, I would say, offices across 40 countries. A very similar approach. And this is also something that's important because it means that Fox IT, who was called by the Maastricht University, the first step is always to kind of do an intelligence surveillance or find out what could possibly have happened. So when Fox IT was called, they started first to try to identify the suspect. And the threat intelligence department of Fox IT identified this as the work of the Drydrax RAT group, and RAT stands for Remote Access Tooling. Typically, it's a ransomware attack in a Microsoft Windows domain environment. And why is this so typical? Because once you figured out how to do this for a Windows domain environment, it's easy to repeat. And once you are in, and we'll talk more about how you can get in, how criminals get in, and then operate. So this is definitely a certain signature that the group leaves behind when they are going to do this attack. And then actually in that same year, so we are now talking just before Christmas, so 12 months have already almost passed. And in that year, over 150 victims show similar modus operandi. And the MO being one or more systems of the users in the network is infected through phishing emails. Then once the hackers are inside, they start identifying the organization. Typically, they don't know they don't know anything about the network internals. They try to move laterally from starting from the workstation or the virtual desktop to other machines, trying to expand their control over the network. Then delete or encrypt backups because they want to make sure that the only solution to their hack is to pay the ransom that they ask. And then they want to roll out the ransomware across as many servers in the network as possible. And once that's all in place, then they send an email demanding the ransom. And this is actually described in the Fontana report that was made public by the Maastricht University. And you can read the report, the lessons learned in this. There was actually a symposium also that discussed it. Really also as an effort by the Maastricht University to talk about it, to make people aware of what happens. And it's actually kind of interesting if you see what the digital forensic investigation, the insights that we got from that. So what you can read in the report is that Fox IT started collecting digital evidence from sources in the network. And you can imagine that a university like Maastricht, even though it's not the biggest university in the Netherlands, it's still big. It's many servers, lots of students. And typically you don't collect all of the evidence at once. So you start to do this incrementally as the investigation progresses. And we'll see more about that in the next slides. Every time you ask for new evidence, you get a new batch of evidence. You need to track that, you need to identify it, to maintain chain of custody. And these batches of collected evidence are uploaded to the forensic lab. In this case, the forensic lab of Fox IT. And what is important to remember is that in ransomware, in cybersecurity attack, where you talk about hackers, ransomware, people are trying to penetrate your network, compromise the network, is what is called indicators of compromise, or IOCs. So if you are collecting data, what you want to do is kind of see if you can find indicators that indicate that there was a network compromise. So that's why they're called indicators of compromise. And when a new indicator of compromise is identified, then you collect additional data because it gives away a bit more of how the attackers worked. Typically, an indicators of compromise also mean that it is an existing compromise technique. So that's been analyzed. You know where to look for the data. You know kind of where the maybe other backdoors are left. So it's good to identify what kind of attack was used, and you do this by the indicators of compromise. Also, companies like Fox IT, but more so even these days, also the computer emergency response team, the CERTs, and the national cybersecurity centers of countries are also making sure they collect those IOCs and they share them with other, for example, critical infrastructure or companies, so that people can be warned beforehand, so they know what to look for. Because you can imagine when there's a new type of attack, nobody at that moment, the first time the attack is being done, nobody knows what the indicators of this particular compromise are. So once you have the first time you found indicators that explain or that show how you can detect the attack, it's very important data. You can share it so that you can help other companies to prevent, to prepare themselves to detect as soon as possible that a compromise is going on. Because I think that's the main concern. The main concern is not only can you keep people from not illegally entering your network, but once they're in, how soon can you detect them? And the longer the attackers are inside your network, the more they can do, the more kind of backdoors they can make, the more time they have to encrypt your backups, to kind of make all kinds of precautions. So keeping attackers out is a big priority, but also being able to detect attackers once they are inside, I would say is just as important, and maybe even more important. So let's take a look at this particular case and how the investigation went. So we're talking about 2019, and what the investigation shows is that malware was downloaded from an external IP address by an SDB bot. And this malware was executed on multiple systems inside the network of the university, and it downloaded additional packets from an external website that became persistent on the Windows computer. So the phishing emails, they download software, but that's not even the real malicious software. It's actually software that starts to download the actual malicious software, actually toolkits that are executed, and that can be used as a backdoor for the hackers to enter. And the investigation showed that you see here 2 emails from October 15th, 2019 and October 16th, the phishing emails they were able to find. And remember, the notification came like 1 or 2 days before Christmas. So this had been already been going on for 2 months. When you further investigate, and that's what Fox IT did, what they found is that the next month, they found that the attackers were spreading through the network. So the software that was downloaded by the phishing bot is called Meterpreter, and is used by attackers to access infected desktop computers. So it's kind of a toolkit, all different kinds of tools that allow you to kind of find holes or maybe crack passwords, and be able to facilitate this lateral movement through the network of the University of Maastricht. So that's how they were able to, after approximately 1 week, the attackers successfully gained access to servers in the network and also install this software on there. And once you install this software on there, why is it interesting? Because on the servers, typically also domain administrators will log in, and potentially you'll be able to get privileges much higher. So not the privilege of a normal users, but actually the privilege of a domain admin. And this is where PowerSploit is installed. And PowerSploit is also a toolkit. It's a collection of PowerShell scripts. Right? So PowerShell is basically similar to a DOS prompt, but a bit more powerful, more like a Unix shell. And all those scripts can be used to test the security of the network. One such a tool is Ping Castle that's installed on a virtual workstation to visualize the Active Directory of the university network. So imagine you are in this network and there's thousands of computers, both from users but also from servers. There's no documentation, so basically the hackers have to explore the network, start from scratch and figure out, so what is the network, where are the valuable data stored, etc., etc. And in this process, they are able to find servers, penetrate the servers, and then finally in November, the attacker is able to obtain network admin privileges using the account of the administrator at Unimaas. And Unimaas is the top level domain of the University of Maastricht. So let's fast forward again 1 month. So in December, they were preparing the ransomware attack. So they've kind of gotten control. They were they know what they were doing. So the next step was actually going to execute a ransomware attack, meaning that they were going to have to encrypt all of the data to be able to ask for ransom. So they used the domain admin account to further explore that Active Directory and the network structure. Basically, they can go now everywhere because they have the domain account. Just before Christmas, they started preparing the ransomware attacks, meaning that to roll out the ransomware software. They switched off Windows Defender, which is basically the default Microsoft antivirus software and firewall security monitoring software. They switched it off, and then they started the ransomware, basically encrypting. And in 25 minutes time, all files at 267 servers were encrypted. And this also included the backup servers. So at that moment, nobody could access that information anymore. So this is actually when those alarm bells started ringing, the university IT admins decided to call Fox IT, get them in place. And this is when Fox IT, who have a incident response team, kind of immediately came to action. So they were hired, engaged probably during Christmas, and the first data they got was from December 30th, and they got a disk and a RAM image from a very specific system, and also from a university, from the university server. And then you see multiple dates, so it's definitely not. So this was kind of their first entry point to get the information, to analyze what they could find. And the next step was actually that based on that investigation of the data that they acquired on December 30th, 3 days later, on January 2nd, they actually collected forensic artifacts from 316 systems. That's kind of part one. They further investigated that, and then 2 weeks later, they actually got the second part of those 316 systems. Meanwhile, they also found out from logs where the phishing emails were at. So at January 6th, they got a disk image from a workstation. They got the data from the domain controller. They were able to identify other servers that were critically misused by the hackers. And this is how, kind of step by step, the incident response team of Fox IT was able to collect digital forensic evidence to complete their investigations. And it was not only the RAM and the disks of servers, because you also have like the firewall, and they have log files. So they have metadata of the network traffic. And they got the first image from the first affected virtual workstation. They got the email boxes a little bit later, at the end of January. Very important, they were also looking at the DNS request. So DNS, the domain name server request. If some traffic goes out and reaches out to a domain to get information like downloading this meterpreter software or downloading the STD bot, this typically will show up in your DNS requests. So they got those requests and analyze those, giving them a better idea also of what kind of malware was loaded into the network. Also, if you have ever looked at the Windows event log, you know there's all kinds of warnings, especially if security measures are switched off. So it makes sense to collect those Windows event logs. And you see that the data type column says Splunk, and Splunk is a tool that's often used in big corporations to merge log files from different servers. So typically having all those log files decentralized in the servers where they come from is not very useful. You want to merge all the different log files from different application servers, network servers, domain controllers into, in this case, a Splunk database. That could be part of your secure operations center where you have all this information available. And that also gives the team a lot of insight, I imagine. And I've tried to fit this on one slide, but here you see from left to right, starting December 30th, the timeline of all the evidence that was collected until February 3, when they finally also downloaded or collected the images from 2 servers. Just to give you an idea of how this process works, it's a little bit over a month where they got some data. Initially, not very much, but they very quickly were able to find out which workstation was infected. The encrypted files they found, also giving the DNS request is kind of this is whenever you start first day, these are very generic log files, images, which you can use to kind of get a starting point of your investigation. And in the case of Fox IT, also identify who could possibly be the perpetrator. What kind of group could be behind this, and what kind of methods do they use? So what's the outcome of that? Because we saw how data was collected. Now it's interesting to see if you're going to analyze it as a forensic investigator, digital forensic investigator, you want to kind of piece this together and come up with a timeline. So what happened when? So these are the highlights. You can read all about this in the report. So as I pointed out, October 15th, October 16th, there was the first STD boot and the second STD boot infection on the workstation. Then October 16th was the first manual activity from the attacker on the workstation from one account, which they redacted. One day later already, the first server was being compromised. Windows Defender detects and removes PowerView malware. So this is interesting if you think about it. So 1 week after the first compromise, the first intrusion, there was already an alarm by Windows Defender who detected something and removed it. Apparently at that time, the system administrators didn't think it was a big deal. They may have noticed it, they may have just gone on. But they might also, if they have done a deeper investigation in October 24, they might have figured out sooner that something was happening in their network. Then a month later, November, we can see that the attacker, maybe also the attacker was a bit shy. It could be that they thought they were discovered. So they decided to do nothing for a couple of weeks to see how things went on and to come back and see if they could still enter the network. So that could very well explain why there was some time between end of October and the 21st of November. So the attacker is back, compromised the servers, and gained access to accounts with domain rights. So at that moment, at the end of November, the attacker has access to the domain account and domain rights. So meaning that they have much more flexibility and freedom to control and to change everything. And even in December, the attacker activity is detected again multiple times by McAfee antivirus software. But nothing, I think it's not acted upon. It's not, doesn't become clear from the report. But then 2 days before Christmas, on December 23rd, the attacker starts with the preparation of the ransomware deployment. Again, the McAfee's antivirus server detects and removes the ransomware deployment tool. But apparently that was bypassed by the attacker, and 1 hour later, he commences deployment of the ransomware. And then, only 30 minutes later, or even less, the largest part of the Windows servers from the university is encrypted by ransomware. And then you see that from the event logs, 3 minutes later only was the latest activity of the attacker on the Maastricht University systems. They contacted Fox IT that same night to set up the engagement, probably. And they start the investigation, and actually on December 30th, the university receives the description key from the attacker after they have paid. And normally it's not quite common to pay the ransomware, it's discouraged actually, but apparently in this situation, the downside of not having the decryption key is very big, and also you are not always certain that you will get the decryption key from the attacker. And so their case is well known. That even you pay, you don't get the key, or if you pay, that they leave behind backdoors in your network, and they come back like a year later. They do the same, and want new ransom. So it's dangerous to pay up for the ransom, as you have no guarantees that it's going to be that you will get the decryption key, and there's no guarantees that they will not repeat their ransomware attack after a while when they want new money. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of in a cyber, in this case a ransomware attack, where you have hackers that attack your network, that get in, kind of have to move around the network, they leave traces, and that by collecting digital evidence from the servers, you can actually do a reconstruction and pretty well figure out what happened and how long they've been inside the network. So the question now is, okay, so how do you do that? How do you become a digital expert? How do companies like Fox IT operate? What kind of tools do you have in so basically what happens in the lab of Fox IT? What happens in the digital forensic lab? So let's dive into that part. That is part 2 of the presentation. And what you always have to remember is that the digital evidence is important for the criminal investigation in cybersecurity case, because you want to kind of hold the perpetrators accountable. So even if it doesn't get you the data back, you want to make sure it deters future cybercrime. You want to say crime doesn't pay. You also want to understand the attacker motives and tactics. And reveal information about the attack strategies and methods, as you can see also in the Hydro North case, what happened. Sometimes you want to be able to recover the losses. And by the way, in the Hydro North case, they've still been going on until I think they arrested people in the Ukraine in 2021 or 2022. At least bringing the perpetrators to justice and putting them in jail, so you can maintain public trust. Which is very crucial, of course, if you talk about critical infrastructure. So if you talk about banks, energy companies, if those companies, those critical infrastructure are impacted, so they become out of service, it impacts a big deal of society, and you have to make sure that you don't lose the trust of the public. And of course, you learn from those investigations, you can improve your cybersecurity practices. I see there's a question, actually 2 questions. I can.
Yeah, would you like to answer them now or hear them now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Let's do that.
So
let's.
Yep. So first, I see there's Harry Kruger. I will give you the ability to speak. Yep. Oh, no, sorry. Here we go. Okay. Harry, if you want to turn your microphone on, you can ask the question now. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for giving this talk. My question is, as you said, the servers in the case you showed, most of the servers were encrypted. I'm curious how they were able to collect the evidence to figure out how the attack works if the evidence or the servers were encrypted.
Yeah, so the attackers focused on the encryption of the data server, so where all the documents are stored. The network equipment, the email servers, they were not encrypted. So I imagine that only part of the network, so where all of the, I would say, the documents related to the business of the Maastricht University, like student business, projects, that kind of data was encrypted, but not the network equipment itself or the domain name servers, they were not encrypted. Good question, but that's, I think if you would encrypt those, also the network would stop functioning, and there would also not be a way to get access by the hackers themselves.
Thank you. And then the next question is from Chanda. If you want to turn your microphone on, we can hear you.
Hello?
Hello? Yeah, we can hear
Hi.
you now.
Yeah, actually, my question is, how do you apply the law? For example, if someone who has attacked you is from a different country, So what kind of, how do you apply the law? Do you apply the law from the, using the international law of justice, or what do you do if someone who has attacked you is not part of that country where cyber attack is coming from?
Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, you are asking what happens if the hackers are from other countries, maybe outside of your jurisdiction. Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so, well, I'm not a legal trained person, but what I saw from the Norsk Hydro case, that actually together with Europol, there were investigations going on, and together with international, it wasn't Interpol in this case, it was Europol, but I mentioned Interpol can also do that, that they actually did house searches in the Ukraine, where the criminals were located. So in this case, you can have, in Europe, you can have joint investigation teams where the law enforcement agencies of different countries are working together, and you can submit requests to ask their support. So this is like a good cross jurisdiction. You can get support, and this is quite often the case in big international cases. I would say because criminals, they have international organizations, and law enforcement knows this very well. So there's a lot of international cooperation when you have crimes that are committed in different countries.
Okay, thank you so much. And then we have a question from Michael. Michael, if you turn your microphone on, we can hear you. Thank you.
Me. Hello?
Yeah,
Hello?
we can hear you.
Okay, so my question is, once the hackers had access, was it to the workstation in particular, did that, was it the hackers, was it that they, when they accessed the network, did it go across VLAN and stuff like that, or was it just inside of one network that the activities were there, or were they able to go across VLANs and stuff like that inside the campus?
Yeah, that's a good question. And what I understand is that they actually didn't, once they got access to this, the workstation of the users, they could move laterally. Yeah? So what you can do with those Meterpreter and Metasploit toolkits, they give you all kinds of remote shell commandos. And basically what the hackers do is they also hijack legitimate ways. Yeah? So system administrators typically can administrate the whole network also remotely. They can install remote tools on user desktop computers, on virtual workstations. And this is why the hackers are eager to get domain access rights and privileges, so they can use the same tools basically as the domain administrators are using to maintain the network. And sometimes it's also tools that combine different permissions in a very, I would say, sophisticated way to achieve things that you think normally aren't possible, but to combine different tools that can make it work. And this is my understanding. This is how they are able to start from a simple workstation that was infected by a phishing email, and then start exploring if you can go to another server or another workstation in the domain.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is that did it go? Did they go cross VLAN? So, for instance, if it were inside one VLAN, let's just say the students VLAN, and then you've got what is it? The staff's VLAN, for instance. Did it go cross VLAN, or did it just stay inside one area? Because as far as I know, as long as they don't get access to the network administration side, it will only stay inside of one VLAN. Just tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, except that at one point there is a connection to other VLANs, and that's typically where the servers are. So the servers are on crossing points. So once you are able to get on a server, and there they have a tool like this ping castle that kind of pings to other network segments. And when you are able to elevate your rights, then you can step over through a server from one VLAN to another.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Like for instance, they were pinging for like a server in a VLAN that had higher authority to other VLANs. Like for instance, a VLAN that had one with less was it firewall rules attached to it. Then they infected one of those machines, and then from there they could infect it to other devices. If that's what I'm getting.
Yeah. Yeah, I have not been in part of this investigation, so it depends also a bit on the technology, but that's basically my assumption of how the things went.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
I see that we are getting more and more questions. So Emma, maybe we should move on and try to do them at the end.
Yeah, I think that we should probably, we will have about 10 minutes at the end for all the Q&A, if that's okay. So if everyone can just keep their questions, and we'll try to get to them at the end of the class. Thank you so much, though, for the participation.
Okay, let's do that. I'll try to move through this in the next 15 minutes. So this slide is basically saying, why do you want to do this? You also have to realize there's a lot of tension, because when you are hacked, and specifically at the ransomware case, you want to get up and running as soon as possible. But getting up and ready as soon as possible typically means that you might destroy evidence as well. So there's a kind of a tension between the people that are collecting the evidence and investigating versus the people that want to get back to business as soon as possible. But the reasons for doing the investigations is going back to business is quite logical and makes a lot of sense. But you have to try to kind of figure out what has been done, because if you don't do that, you might suffer from a second attack, and you don't want the perpetrators to get free afterwards. So let me skip a bit faster. This is an interesting model that I have been using for the last, I would say, 20 years. And there's multiple models, don't get me wrong, but this is the electronic discovery reference model. I know it from, I would say, large email review investigations, but you can also use it in incident response investigations. And there's different steps in there. And at the start, the information governance is not something that a digital forensic provider like Fox IT will have to do. But what is good if a company has a good record of how their information in their company is governed. I found out too many times that if you go in after an incident, you want to have information like where are the email servers, what kind of applications are you running, where are the DNS servers, Active Directory. That is not a clear picture. I think at the University of Maastricht, we cannot see, of course, what happened behind the scenes, but they were able to provide all of the data that was asked. But definitely 10, 15 years ago, it was not always logical to have this information governance ready. So basically, when you come in as a service provider, you want to investigate, you want to know, kind of have a blueprint. And the hackers, of course, have to kind of explore and find out what the blueprint is. But hopefully, if you are going in there as a service provider to find the hackers, it would be nice if the company that has hired you has a information map or a map of the information landscape of the company available. This is the information governance. So this is also, I think, why it's good to for companies to invest in good information governance for lots of reasons, but one of them being if there's an incident, you want to make sure that you know where to look for data. So that's the first part that you're always going to run into. And then you see the red, the purple, the blue, the sea green and the green part, where you have the steps where you go through. And the first part is the identification. So the identification always, given the incident, so in Fontana it was kind of, we received a ransomware note, going to determine what we need to preserve and collect. And identify the sources of information, what period of time, who's involved, because you simply cannot collect all of the information. And some information that is not easy to collect, you maybe can preserve, like backup tapes. So if you think about the Maastricht University, in total they have nearly 9,000 computers, which has servers, physical workstation, and virtual workstation. So it's too much to do that. And they actually, so Fox IT used what they call, this is another tool that they use, carbon black sensors, that actually help them monitor the network to see what else is going on. I've been involved in 2012 in the Black Tulip investigation when I was with Fox IT, which was about the DigiNotar incident, which was a much smaller organization, but still they had a lot of computers, workstations, and it was kind of, even for a small company, if you have to go in there and figure out what has been hacked, when, and how, it's already very complicated. So identification states in this EDRM model is a very important step to find out what to do. And you need to kind of have a good, clear view, what is my goal? What do I need to investigate? And if you think about this in a broader perspective, I mean, digital forensics at the NFI, we always think about the narrative. Right? You have to come up with a narrative that is coherent and believable, and that is supported by sufficient criminal evidence. It's exactly the same for your cyber investigations. And also think about the 7 W questions: who, what, where, when, what, with, in what way, and why. They all apply in these type of investigations. But in Fontana, we saw that they were going after different types of storage, the DNS records, the email server, the firewall logs, all kind of different sources that were that they know, that the Fox IT investigators know, this is going to help us when we have to figure out what happened and how long the hackers have been there. So these are the examples. Also the master file table MFT. And this is something that you learn if you are studying digital forensics. How can we get specific information about manipulations? If somebody deletes a file, for example, that also leaves a trace in the system. So if you want to find out, and hackers typically always try to remove their traces. So if you're looking for traces that have been deleted, there are some kind of smart things to do There are cache files like the app compatibility, the AM cache, the shim cache, that can provide a timeline of which program is executed and when it was first run and last modified. But these records remain there even after the program itself has been deleted. So it's very useful if you're doing digital forensics. And of course, the event log from Windows.
Sorry to interrupt, just to let you know that there are 15 more minutes left.
Yes, great, thank you. I'll speed up even a bit more. So if you, we saw this in Vandaan, you identified what we need, then we're going to preserve and collect. And preserve is basically, you don't have time to collect it, but you don't want to change, so like backup tapes. You just want to make sure they are not overwritten. But collecting, you're going to do that and collect the data. There's a lot of tooling about collection. I think what's very important is that you collect it in a way that it keeps the integrity of the data. If you forensically correct data, it must not be changed. So that's a very crucial point in data preservation and collection. There's different ways to collect data. So the forensic image, you copy all of the data. So you also copy unallocated data. This gives you the opportunity to look for deleted files. But the logical copy only is smaller. It only copies the files that exist at the time that you copy the data. And one way to prove that your data hasn't changed is by calculating a secure hash. And these days, typically SHA-1, the secure hash algorithm 1, is used to provide a unique fingerprint of the message. I don't have enough time, but I'll quickly give you an idea of what a hash is. And I'm using a picture as an example. Let's say we have this red tulip, and you know pictures are made of pixels, and pixels are basically numbers. So what you can do is you can provide a hash algorithm. I'm using like a simulated simple hash algorithm that would add, for example, all of the digits, that would put the digits of the pixels under each other. It could add them, and it would kind of take the modulo of that, and you get a 3. You do this for all of the numbers, and you repeat this again, and then you would get a hash of 30,754. Now, what is a secure hash is that this is a kind of a one-way function, and that's very unlikely. And you see here the picture of SHA-1. It's a complicated manipulation of bits. It's secure because it's very unlikely that you will have two different files, even if it's only 1 bit difference, that give you the exact same hash. Meaning that you can use hashes to prove that if you have the data 2 years later and you calculate the hash and it still has the same hash as 2 years ago, you can kind of prove that the data hasn't changed. So you do that when you're collecting data, you're going to calculate those hashes. You can use all kinds of tools to provide additional metadata if you don't have time, because taking a forensic copy of a computer takes a long time. Maybe you don't have that time. So this is why Fox IT, for example, focuses on specific information that are related to these indicators of compromise. And for that reason, Fox IT developed their own software. So if you want to further follow up on this story, I know that their dissect tools actually made open source. But they also use closed source. There are lots of different tools available in the community that I will show you at the end. So that's all collecting data, and collecting data in a big network, like doing that to dissect and the GRR, but also carbon block, they allow you to collect data over the network. So it makes it much easier. You don't have to go there on site. You don't have to open up computers, take hard drives out, copy hard drives. This is all based on the network. Once you get the data, once you're in the lab, of course, then you're going to process the data. Extract the data, convert the data. You're going to reconstruct the data in a way that you can investigate it in the lab. And there are so many different tools that you can use to do that. These are the ones that you typically for law enforcement are being used in criminal investigations, not per se in cyber investigations. If you do mobile phone investigations, you have specific tools for carving, magnet forensics, XOI, Celebrite, for mobile phones specifically. There's too much, and it's continuously evolving. Also, lots of open source tools. And the digital forensic expert typically have all those tools in their chest, in their tool chest, and they can choose from which tool they want to use, depending. There's overlap. Also, things are happening very fast, so sometimes tools are not up to the task, or you want to kind of verify. I'm using two different tools. Do they give the same answer as a kind of validation step in your forensic investigation? This is also where you use the hashing, either for chain of custody, like I explained, but you can also use hashes for deduplication, for removing known files. This is the so-called NIST list, but also if you have like child pornography pictures that have been identified in the past, and you have the hash values for those pictures, it becomes very easy to detect the presence of exactly the same pictures in that file. I'm aware of the time, so sorry I'm going through this, but I will share my slides. In review analysis, actually, you're going to go through that. You can use timeline analysis to figure out what may have happened at a certain time. By the way, this is a screenshot from Axiom. You want to do maybe malware analysis to figure out what actually did this piece of code do. Volatility is a tool for analyzing memory. And then finally, once you've done all your work, you've figured out the facts, you're going to put them together in your analysis, and you're going to write up your report. There's lots of things to say about the report. If you want to learn more about report writing, I have included a link to, unfortunately, they are in Dutch, but they provide guidelines for writing reports. And there's so many things more happening. So I'm chairman of the board of directors of DVWS. It's an annual event, happens in the US, in Europe, and in APEC. So the next one is in Brno, beginning of April. Then there's one in July in the USA. And there will be an APEC conference in Seoul, in Korea, in October. So go to the website. There you can find. Papers are published on the Journal of Digital Investigation. You might find those interesting as well. In Europe, we have ENISA for cybersecurity trainings. There are blogs. Twitter is giving you lots of things that are happening. So lots of places to go to get good feedback. And I hope that, sorry about having to speed up, but we did manage to get some questions done. Maybe you have time for some more questions, Emma.
Yes, absolutely. So starting right off the bat, there's a question in the chat that goes, what if all the workstation servers and all encrypted with the display message on the screen asking for ransom? How can we collect the data when all the machines are encrypted?
Yeah, I think that's the same question we got earlier. And I showed a table where you see there's 9,000 computers in the net, almost 9,000, and they're not all 9,000 encrypted. I think the hacker encrypted like 200 servers or so. So it's not possible. Sometimes it's, I think for the impact, you don't need to collect all that. You don't need to encrypt all of the servers. So that's
Okay,
how you can actually do that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Harry Kruger, I allowed your microphone. I'm going to go in order now.
Hello. Another question I have is, I've noticed in this example you've given that phishing attack was used as the initial way to get in the network. Is that a very common way that is used to get into networks, and is that an area that companies need improvement in?
Yeah. Yes, that's what I see a lot. And that's also, I think, in almost any company that they'll do some awareness campaigns. And if you have a chief information security officer, typically they will do campaigns, maybe once or twice a year, where they hire an external company to perform a kind of a test phishing campaign. First, making sure their employees have taken a course to do awareness, and then see if it worked. So they'll send, so the external company that they hired will send phishing emails, and they will kind of see what happens. Will employees actually forward it to their IT department and saying, hey, I saw a suspicious email, or will they be clicking the link and basically meaning that the course didn't really work? So what companies are doing is to increase awareness by giving more trainings and actually performing phishing mail campaigns, kind of fake ones, to make people more aware of this problem.
Okay, thank you. Next is Athenkosi. Let me enable your mic, allow your mic. You can turn on your microphone now. Thanks.
So my question is not related to, or it's not, it's actually for you, Emma. I have a problem with the games. I can't access, like my email says that the user is not found when I try to log into, and I did try to email, but I haven't gotten any response.
Okay, if you can perhaps send me a private message just so that we can allow the questions pertaining to this lecture right now. If you just want to send me a private message on Teams, we can resolve it later. Thank you. Okay, so we have time for one more question. Takunda, I'm allowing your mic. There you go. Takunda, perhaps you have been habilitated your mic.
Sure. I just have a question about the whole implementation part of the framework that you've just discussed, because I'm seeing that this is mostly done post attack, and the aim is to gather as much evidence as possible so as to the purposes that you just mentioned, holding perpetrators accountable, recovering losses, etc. So, if I were to one day want to work as one of the forensic investigators in cyber, where would be the best place to start? Do I start from understanding systems or networking? What would be the best place for me to start? Because I am curious, I'm intrigued. I want to know more about how I can put myself in that place.
Yeah. Well, I understand completely, Takunda. Thank you for the question. I think you have to decide for yourself. Is like cybersecurity really what catches your interest? I think you need to cover the basics. So you need to understand IT. You need to understand IT infrastructure. And then I guess it's good to have training. I've seen people that got started as an IT administrator, so they learned a lot about how an IT infrastructure works. And then they learn how to use the tools. You could do this by following additional trainings. And then if you have this basic experience as an IT administrator, you could either go to a consultancy firm. So this could be like the big four. I worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers, for example, with Deloitte, KPMG, or boutique firms like Fox IT that take in junior staff, and you can learn more as you go. At some point, the larger companies, they will have their own IT security department, and you can work. For example, Shell is a really big company, Shell oil company. They have big departments. They operate 24 hours around the clock from the US, from Europe and India, I think. They have a big team where they investigate all of the incidents, warnings in their secure operations center. And I think that by really being inside such a company or either a consultancy company, starting maybe at getting lots of experience, that would be good, a good way how to get into this field. Is that a bit helpful?
Yeah, quite helpful. I appreciate that insight.
Okay.
Okay, we have 1 minute to spare. I'm not sure if we want to try one more quick question or wrap it up here and give everyone about a 15-minute break before their next lecture. Let me know also what you prefer, Hans. Maybe we
I
can
have
call
time
it
for
in
one. I have time
one
for one
more?
more question. Yes, no problem.
Perfect. Okay. Perfect. I am habilitating your microphone. You should be able to talk now. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. Just a quick one. I've observed and noted that phishing on emails have become quite the very entry point for this cyber attack. My question is, with a situation like such a university, how do you sensitize every staff and member that this should be avoidable, this should be a no-go area? And how do you also ensure that there is no internal interest or one of the student or staff member is directly connected to the scam? That's my question.
I didn't quite get your full question. So is your question how somebody inside the company is connected to the scam? Is that the question?
Can you check your email for another invite to GitHub that you set by Kesley?
Sorry, I believe someone's
Yes.
microphone was on.
Yeah.
Perfect. Go ahead.
Yes, I was saying phishing being the most and prominent entry point for cyber attack.
Yeah.
How do you sensitize an institution such as a university with a lot of, I've noticed there's over 8,873 network. How do you sensitize each and every staff member to be aware of such kind of entry point or attack? And how do you also safeguard the system? Yet there could be a potential that a staff member or a student could be part of the attackers.
Yeah. So I think there's two parts here. So we already discussed, I mentioned a couple of things about, I would say, making people aware of what can happen. I see that, so that helps. I think the systems are smarter, so the spam filters are getting better. They do malware detection, so actually they will put emails in quarantine when they suspect it. I'm not sure if the end of your question was about insider attacks. The insider threat, which is often mentioned, is that somebody from inside your organization actually can provide access to the network, which is always a possibility, of course. And companies have to prepare for that. So all of the logging, the carbon black files, the endpoint detection, antivirus, companies should actually make precautions. It's also maybe called forensic readiness, where they are defensible against both outside attacks, but also by insider attacks. So they can always investigate what happened and either find out if it's somebody from inside or somebody from the outside. And in some cases, with a phishing attack, it might be difficult to identify because initially you might think that the user that was infected actually is the perpetrator, while this person might not be aware of anything, but might be the victim of a phishing attack. So you have to kind of take that into account as well in your investigation. I hope that answered your question. Perfect.
Okay, thank you so much again for today and coming here and lecturing us all on digital forensics. It was really a great lecture, and I'm sure everyone is thanking you. Of course, they're not habilitated with the microphone, unfortunately, but thanks also for taking the extra time and answering the questions and making this lecture a bit more interactive with stopping halfway. That's really appreciated. But I will now end the meeting just to so that people have enough time for a break before our next course with Prince Bussemaker. Thank you again. And have a
Okay.
nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.